Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Probax and Veeam on the market opportunity for Office 365 data protection. I am Sam Megahaj, CEO of Probax, and joining me today is David Hills, Cloud Systems Engineer at Veeam. David, welcome and thank you for co-presenting today. Before we get started, I need to run through a few housekeeping items. Firstly, everyone has been muted. So if you've got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. It's unlikely that we will need the full hour, so we should have plenty of time to get to your questions. So today's presentation is being recorded and we'll aim to make these slides and the recording available as soon as possible. So the agenda for today is structured as follows. We'll start off with a very brief introduction to Probax. Next, David will discuss why customers need a data protection strategy for Microsoft Office 365. We'll then take a look at how MSPs can accelerate their recurring revenue growth by selling SaaS protection solutions like our very own Office 365 backup. I'll then share with you what some of our most successful partners are doing today when it comes to positioning and selling Office 365 backup and archive to their prospects and their clients. And I'll also share with you how you can leverage Probax's very own digital marketing library to help launch your very own lead generation campaigns quickly and easily. And if you're not already a Probax partner, don't worry, because we're going to give you free access to our marketing library just for attending today's webinar. And finally, we'll open it up to questions at the end for closing out the webinar. So for those of you who are attending today's webinar and know nothing about Probax, we are a multi-vendor, multi-tenant data protection platform for MSPs. We are 100% channel focused, meaning we don't transact directly with end users. In most cases, we will provide end user leads to our MSP partners across Australia, New Zealand, the US and Canada. We offer intelligent and automated cloud-based data protection solutions, including backup as a service, archive as a service, DR as a service, cloud-to-cloud SaaS protection solutions for Microsoft Office 365 and Dropbox, managed data protection services and Veeam licensing. We integrate with leading backup availability and SaaS solutions. Today we integrate with Veeam, StorageCraft, Microsoft Office 365 and Dropbox. So if you're using one or more of those solutions, you can centrally monitor and manage your client's data protection requirements and solutions from a multi-vendor, multi-tenant dashboard Probax control. We've enjoyed quite consistent and positive growth over the past few years. We're always tracking client satisfaction and NPS, both of which are very positive. And we have infrastructure in our DCs in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and New Jersey. We also leverage AWS for our Office 365 backup and archive solution. And we use Wasabi in the US for our Dropbox backup and archive solution. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, we offer a whole bunch of data protection solutions, all of which can be activated, monitored and managed from our dashboard Probax control. Veeam is by far our strongest and closest technology partner. And in fact, most of the solutions you see on the screen are built on or integrate with Veeam technology. The only Probax solution that Veeam does not touch today is Dropbox backup and archive. But today, we're really focusing on SaaS protection and specifically how offering an Office 365 data protection solution can help grow your MSP business. So on that note, David, I'm going to hand over to you to talk about why customers really need a Microsoft Office 365 backup solution.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I'll get you to just skip on to the next slide, if you will. So it's actually quite surprising that I'm still having this conversation quite often, but it is far less than it used to be. And in fact, Veeam's done quite a bit of research on what the market perception is around whether or not Office 365 and of course some of the other software as a service offerings as well need data protection. The answer is of course absolutely, and what we're seeing is that most organizations are now starting to pick up on this. So So here's some of Veeam's data. About 74% of businesses actually aren't doing anything at the moment. The good news is that reliance on native tools conversation has dropped quite considerably. Now those are of course Veeam's numbers. If you'd skip on to the next slide, we'll see that Veeam aren't the only people saying this. So here is 451 Research as an example, and I've saved you guys the 4 or 5 marketing slides that go with the 4 or 5 other analysts that are all saying very, very similar things, which is that when you go down a software as a service path, almost every vendor has some form of concept of the end user being responsible for their own data, and Office 365 is definitely not an exception to this. So what does Microsoft say about protection for Office 365? If you skip on to the next slide for me. Well, here's the architecture. And so as you can see from the Microsoft site directly, with Office 365, it's your data, you own it, you control it. That's a very nice way of saying that it's your responsibility if something breaks. The not so nice way is actually from Microsoft's own TechNet, the backing up Office 365 microsite, where they say pretty clearly that point-in-time retention of mailbox items is out of the scope of the Microsoft Exchange Online service. Now, what does that mean? This page goes into a whole heap of detail about things like litigation hold and how you can recover an individual item if you want to know what it is, but it then also starts to outline what we call the shared responsibility model. So we'll have to build this slide out, but the very clear way of seeing this is that everything across the top is what Microsoft are responsible for. Effectively, Microsoft's responsible for the availability of the platform, and everything in grey at the bottom of the page is what Microsoft are expecting you to be responsible for. The easiest way of summing this up is if a user was to say delete an email, it goes into the recycle bin. Once it's gone from the recycle bin, it will stay there for a couple of weeks. Once it's gone from there, it is gone forever. And you can see that on the next slide where we actually break out these. Without data protection, a lot of that control is entirely lost, and we'll skip over that very nice big green warning of if you don't back it up, then it's gone. There we go. So why do we want to back up our Office 365? Well, most of Microsoft's tools are presuming that a user knows what they are doing. And so what that means is in situations where either a user doesn't know what they're doing or a technology issue is what causes the data loss, that is where it suddenly gets non-standard from a Microsoft perspective. And I've seen lots of conversations about PowerShell scripts, which is really not the sort of thing you want to be doing when the general manager's mailbox has gone away. So retention policies and being able to absolutely guarantee that those messages that are being received or sent by the sales team are being captured by your reporting and logging, being able to protect against ransomware and those external threats. We've been pretty lucky at this stage that we haven't seen organizational-wide Office 365 ransomware. We have seen plenty targeting individual users, and of course, ransomware encryption of OneDrive is just a day-to-day occurrence now. I think we're all violently dreading the day when a piece of malware finally finds its way past multi-factor authentication. And of course, it's important to remember that a lot of deployments now aren't purely Office 365 or purely on-premises. We have a lot of customers that are leveraging hybrid environments, and we need to protect the hybrid environment in its whole. So for data sitting on an on-premises hybrid Exchange server, especially popular where people have very, very large shared mailboxes, we want to make sure that we're able to protect those as well. So how often these things actually happen? They do, and that's probably the most important thing that this slide says. My history, I didn't begin with it at the beginning. I have come from being 10 years as a security architect, and when you work in security for too long, you start to get jaded to these sorts of things because it is an everyday occurrence. And so you should all be seeing it. Hopefully everyone will be familiar with the idea, and at the very least your customers almost certainly will be. Data protection for the online services is absolutely critical. Retention policy gaps, 30%. So much for litigation hold covering everything. Now, what does it actually look like for Microsoft? Well, while data is sitting in someone's inbox, it's pretty safe. It's very unlikely that data is going to go away while it's sitting in someone's inbox. Now, hopefully most of you will be familiar with the fact that once you delete it, it's gone. It will sit in some type of deleted form. It may go into the recoverable items for a while there, but effectively once an email is deleted, it's gone. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and Microsoft's litigation hold, as well as their new retention policies, are a great example of those. When we're specifically talking about email, and I'll talk a little bit later on around the ability to search across an entire tenant, particularly useful for recovering of content that you may not know exactly who or where or what user it is. Now, as we move down, the very bottom one is actually my very favorite example of this, when an employee leaves a company. Because when an employee leaves, that doesn't necessarily have to be permanent. And so anyone that's ever dealt with engineers may be familiar with this concept that when a staff member leaves, you convert their mailbox to a shared mailbox so that you don't have to pay for it anymore. When a user potentially comes back, you convert it back into a user. Functionally, what we see, someone goes on paternity leave, an administrator turns off their Office 365 account without necessarily understanding the repercussions of that. Shortly later, the person comes back from paternity leave and asks very politely, whereabouts are all my OneDrive and extended line items? That is not the sort of thing that litigation hold is going to recover you from, and this is where we want a slightly more comprehensive backup solution. Now, while we talk about ransomware, some of you may have seen this stat. It's a pretty well-known one at this point. The average time of detection of data loss or compromise is 140 days, well beyond what the standard retention policies for most software as a service offerings are going to provide you. All right, so of course, everything nice and green. And this is probably not something to snigger out. It is an important point that with Veeam's backup for Microsoft Office 365, especially when backed by Probax, allows you to have your retention policies set as you require it. And so if you're wanting to be retaining data effectively in perpetuity, you're welcome to be able to do that. And so it really is about giving you complete control of your protection of Office 365. Having that being completely separated off of Microsoft's platform so that you're no longer reliant on data sitting within a particular vendor, absolutely helping to prevent any type of lock-in long-term with Office 365, and allowing for the export and recovery of individual user data for as long as is required by your own customers' policies. So yeah, recovering individual items, recovering entire mailboxes out as a PST or zip file if that's what you want, even exporting things like a user's OneDrive as a zip file if you suspect that in the future you may need that content for one reason or another, or anyone that has contacts within HR.
Great, thanks for that, David. Now let's take a look at how MSPs can accelerate their recurring revenue growth by selling SaaS protection solutions like our very own Office 365 backup and archive. Before we do that, I want to take a backward step and really look at all the benefits for MSPs who are selling SaaS protection services today. Now, according to a new report from Better Cloud, 73% of organizations are looking to move almost all of their line of business applications to SaaS by 2020, and more than half already have. And Microsoft Office 365 obviously plays a major role in those numbers. Microsoft dominates the SaaS market. They've got an annual growth rate of 45%. And also remember David's point from earlier that 74% of businesses using Office 365 today are left unprotected. So there's definitely a proven market opportunity. And if you're not already jumping at this opportunity, then in my opinion, you're leaving money on the table. Peace of mind for both you and your clients. Lost client data is a significant risk to your business with both financial and reputational impact. Now, you can spend months and years building up a great reputation with one of your clients, but all it takes is one data loss event to bring it crashing down. And it's really hard to come back from an incident that involves data loss. Capturing new clients. So in my opinion, this isn't a hard sell, provided you do it right. And it's also not a huge commitment in terms of spend. So it's one of those services that will allow you to get your foot in the door with new clients. And from there, you obviously start having conversations on what else you can do to support their business and their growth strategy. Strengthening existing client relationships. So MSPs are typically seen as a trusted advisor for their clients. So you need to be having these conversations and educating your clients. And I say this all the time to our partners, that if you don't do it, one of your competitors will. And lastly, one of the biggest benefits, and probably one of the reasons why you're joining today's webinar, is that it adds monthly recurring revenue to your MSP business. For relatively very little effort. In most cases, this is a set and forget service until you need it. Now, before I begin to talk about how you can take advantage of our Office 365 backup and archive solution to really accelerate your recurring revenue growth, I really need to explain how the solution works and how it's priced. So it's a cloud-to-cloud data protection solution for Office 365. And what I mean by that is we essentially back up data directly from Office 365 into AWS. Our solution is, of course, powered by Veeam Backup for Office 365, but wrapped around it is our own user interface, self-service capability, automation, permission verification, backup verification, alerting and reporting. So we take up to 6 automated point-in-time restore points per day and allow you to create as many ad hoc restore points as required. When restoring data, your options are to restore back to the original source or export to file. So that's PST for Exchange and zip for SharePoint and OneDrive. And you'll notice on the diagram that we offer unlimited storage and retention. So for a fixed monthly fee per user, you receive unlimited storage and retention AWS. So you don't need to worry about your cost blowing out as your client's Office 365 data grows. This ensures that your margin remains constant throughout the life of the service. So everything is included in the per user fee. You don't need to worry about paying for a Veeam license. You don't need to worry about paying for any data transfer or data retrieval fees. That's all included in the monthly fee. So how do you make money with SaaS protection? At first glance, the product may seem low value and you may think to yourself, how can I possibly make money selling this? But I'm here to tell you, selling a per user data protection service across multiple organizations, right? So across your client base adds up a lot quicker than you think. So here's our backup for Office 365 pricing table for Australian partners, showing you RRP as well as buy price across our first 4 partner levels: Flex, Bronze, Silver and Gold. There's three levels of protection. There's Exchange only, SharePoint and OneDrive only, and Complete Protection, which incorporates Exchange, SharePoint and OneDrive. You can also mix user protection levels per organization. So you may want to protect Exchange mailboxes for some users and protect everything for all other users. The flexibility in the solution is there if you want it. But for the example I'm about to show you, I'm going to assume that I'm a Probax Silver partner because that's our most common partner level. And I'm also going to sell our complete Office 365 protection to a 75-seat client. So that brings, so that's Exchange, that's SharePoint, that's OneDrive protection for each of the 75 users. Over the course of a typical year, that brings in $6,300 in additional recurring revenue to your MSP business. And based on the margin that our silver partners typically make, you're bringing in $2,250 in additional recurring margin per year. Now remember, that's just for one client. So my question to you is, how many clients do you have? Even if you were to only sell Office 365 data protection to a third of your client base, that's still a considerable amount of money that gets added to your top line and your bottom line each year for very little effort. In most cases, like I said before, this is a set and forget data protection solution that just ticks away in the background until it's needed. And the automation, the permission verification, the backup verification, the alerting and the reporting, all that stuff that I mentioned earlier will tell you if something is wrong. If permissions to a SharePoint or a OneDrive site have changed and the backups are no longer working, then Probax Control will tell you. But for the majority of the time, that doesn't happen and the solution just ticks away in the background, making your business money. So let's take a look at what some of our most successful partners are doing today when positioning and selling Office 365 backup and archive to their prospects and clients. Now, before you go out and start pounding the pavement, trying to sell SaaS protection services, you really need to understand that in terms of your client's needs and risks, one size does not fit all. So you really need to ask questions to understand your client's overall business. You need to understand their perspective and their specific situation. And this will help you tailor a solution that meets the requirements and put together a business case to hopefully convince them to invest in SaaS protection services. Now, in some cases, they may not have the budget to implement SaaS protection services across the entire organization straight away. So by understanding what's critical and what's less critical, you can put forward a plan to roll out SaaS protection services over time, starting with, of course, protecting the most critical data. So these are just some of the discovery questions you should be asking your clients to help you understand their business, their perspective, and their specific situation. Once you have all that information, you really need to begin filling any knowledge gaps that your client has. Educating your clients is an incredibly important step, right? So the most common misunderstanding that I hear all the time is that the SaaS vendor is responsible for both the service and the data inside of it. And as David indicated earlier, that is definitely not the case. So taking Office 365 as an example, obviously, like I said before, one of the common pushbacks I hear is that Microsoft just takes care of everything. So a backup solution is just a waste of money. So you really need to educate the client on where the SaaS vendor's responsibility starts and ends, what their vulnerabilities are, what their exposure is, so that they can make an informed decision on how they choose to mitigate those risks. Provide real-life examples of data loss. So there's a ton of stories out there. So find one that fits the industry you're trying to sell to and help them understand the value of their data. Ask them how much their data is worth, what it would cost their business if their SaaS data was unavailable for a day. Most business owners fail to really understand the true value of their data. So taking them through that process will hopefully help them realize the business impact of downtime and hopefully justify the additional spend to protect against it. So if you're not sure how to help your clients understand the value of their data, we have a tool that can help you. The Probax Downtime Calculator is available in our digital marketing toolkit, and I'll get to how you guys can access that in a few slides, but all it requires is a few variables to work out the hourly cost of downtime. But it's also important to remember that lost revenue and lost productivity as a result of downtime is just one of the just one part of the overall impact on a business, right? So there's obviously the remediation costs to resolve the underlying issue that led to downtime in the first place. And then there's a big one, the reputational cost. And these days, ransomware attacks, they're making headlines. So the risk of reputational impact is so much higher. And to you as an MSP, if you have a customer who has experienced this, you know that your reputation will obviously take a hit as well. So educate your customers, educate them with real life market statistics. Now these are quite scary, but they will help get your point across. Now I'm not going to run through these one by one, but my favorite and probably the most surprising to me anyway is the stat around 75% of companies infected with ransomware were running up-to-date AV. What are your thoughts on some of these stats, David? They're pretty scary.
Yeah, they most certainly are. And the worst thing is that we've all seen it. We've all dealt with customers that have had some type of ransomware attack. And in fact, it is really just a daily occurrence now to see the laptop infected, and that very quickly do other things. In fact, I was reading something this morning about an Australian service provider that was emailing a bunch of their customers with a fake OneDrive because a salesperson inside the organization had logged into one of those fake OneDrive sign-ins. So it is almost certainly a frequent occurrence. It's also a reminder that we talk a lot about ransomware, but we forget that sometimes humans do silly things too. One of my very, very favorite examples is actually not related to malware at all. It's a New Zealand law firm that one of the partners ran one of those LinkedIn synchronization tools to keep their contacts up to date with LinkedIn. They had been storing long-term customer notes in the notes field on a contact, which seems like a completely plausible place to keep notes on a customer, up until this LinkedIn synchronization tool decided that that box was a good place to put their LinkedIn URL and overrode several years worth of notes on their individual accounts. Now, of course, it used to be when you had on-prem Exchange, you could go back and recover that sort of thing, maybe not easily, but at least it was recoverable. This particular customer was very lucky that they'd only just implemented Veeam backup for Office 365, which is why I know about it. Now, of course, think about that on a scale of telling the partner in the law firm, I'm sorry, your many years worth of customer notes, they're gone. Best not run that LinkedIn synchronization tool again.
Wow. But let's not just make it about ransomware, right? So let your customers know that, here's another statistic, 43% of SaaS data loss is due to user error. So you're not just protecting about ransomware, but you're protecting against the users themselves accidentally or maliciously destroying data. So educate your clients on this stuff. And I'm not just saying throw a bunch of stats out there and scare the crap out of them. That's not the case at all. Remember that these are real life statistics. These are things that are happening to businesses all around the globe. So it's important that your clients understand what's happening and can make an informed decision on what they want to do. The other thing to be aware of is that ransomware infections are now spreading to SaaS applications like Office 365. And aside from endangering your inbox, they can also lock you out of OneDrive files and SharePoint sites living in the cloud. Now, according to Datto's latest annual ransomware report, of the 2,400 plus MSP surveyed, 28% claim to have seen ransomware attacks in SaaS applications. And of those MSPs, nearly half of the respondents reported seeing the attacks in Office 365 specifically. And again, this is stuff you should be educating your clients on, right, as their trusted advisor. So my final piece of advice when positioning SaaS protection is to bundle it with the sale of the underlying SaaS solution. SaaS protection should no longer be an optional or add-on service in 2019. The risks are just far too high. So for existing clients who are already using Office 365, be their trusted advisor, follow the sales steps we've outlined today, and the sale should come naturally. If it doesn't, my suggestion to you is to have your client sign a waiver acknowledging that they refuse SaaS protection. Now that will achieve two things. Firstly, it will protect your own MSP business. So if your clients don't want protection, make sure you protect yourselves. And number two, it will hopefully make them realize the seriousness of not having SaaS protection. Now let's look at how you can leverage Probax's digital marketing library to help launch your very own lead generation campaigns quickly and easily. As I said earlier, don't worry if you're not already a Probax partner, because we're going to give you 7 days of free access to our marketing library just for attending today's webinar. So being a 100% channel-focused business, much like Veeam, our success is obviously based on the success of our partners. So we've spent a great deal of time and money developing sales, marketing, and technical resources that will allow our partners to be more successful. What I want to focus on today is our digital marketing toolkit, which is our free library of marketing assets designed to help our partners and you guys customize and launch your own lead generation campaigns quickly and easily. So by navigating to the link that you see in green, www.probax.io/webinar.toolkit, these slides will come out, so don't feel as though you've got to write that down straight away. But by navigating to that address, you will get free access to this content for 7 days. So you'll have access to a guidebook on how to use our digital marketing toolkit. You'll gain access to general data protection content, including a disaster preparedness checklist, social media and website content, email templates by industry, data protection legislation information. You'll get access to a customizable sales deck with some really informative stats on data protection. You get access to solution diagrams, the business downtime calculator shown to you previously, and you'll also gain, more relevant to this, you'll also gain access to SaaS protection specific content in the form of social media content, an email template for new prospects, an email template for existing clients, and 2 blog posts promoting Office 365 data protection. Now, most of these documents are in editable format, right? So you can chop and change, plagiarize, whatever you need to. That's what we designed it for. So that really brings us to the end of the webinar. If you want to know more about Probax, you can head over to our website, www.probax.io, or email our sales team at sales@probax.io. There's also the option of creating a 14-day trial account. No payment details are required. By default, you'll have access to Office 365 backup and archive, Dropbox backup and archive, and backup as a service for Veeam, also known as Veeam Cloud Connect Backup. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to questions, but before I do, David, thank you again for co-presenting. It's been great to have you on board for today's live webinar.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for inviting me along.